All right, so yeah, welcome to the second of what will now be a four-part webinar series about the Great Divide Trail. Tonight, we're going to be talking exclusively about gear selection for a Great Divide Trail hike, whether that's for a weekend, a section, or if you're going to do a full through hike. I first think it's appropriate that we give a bit of a land acknowledgement. The Great Divide Trail passes through the unceded lands of the Siksika, Tsakapi, Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, the Ayak's-Chin Nakota, the Nahiawak Cree, Late Litene, Tanaha, Shwetmik, Sinaiaks, and Métis nations. I and the Great Divide Trail Association appreciate the opportunity to interact with this land, and we recognize the privilege we have to experience the remarkable beauty along this whole trail. As with the first webinar that we have, and for the foreseeable future, all the ones we have upcoming, these are intentionally free. We really want to make sure that everybody that wants to learn about the Great Divide Trail, how to interact with the trail, how to experience the trail, has all this information without having any barriers. But as part of that, the Great Divide Trail Association is a nonprofit. Everybody that works or volunteers with it, it's all for free, so nobody's making any money. And memberships are greatly appreciated. To give you some perspective, and if you were in the first webinar, you would have heard this as well. So in 2021, we spent over 5,000 volunteer hours building trail, which included finishing the High Rock Trail, which is in section B, which kept you from walking on the road for a very long time. We put in a couple new bridges. We refurbished over 18K in the Jack Pine Valley, which was incredibly brushy and was a serious mental challenge. So we had to get helicopters, fly people in there, spent a long time in there, really getting that up to par with where it should be. And we maintained an additional 165 kilometers of trail between the High Rock Trail, the David Thompson Trail, and other sections of the GDT, which also included putting in new privies, tables, bear boxes. And then when we aren't out building trail, we're preparing for these trips, we're planning, we're strategizing, and we're advocating on behalf of the Great Divide Trail. And we spent over 4,000 hours doing that last year between the team. If you are interested in becoming a member or donating, I've posted the link in the chat there below. All right, now let's get to the fun stuff. So I want to introduce all three of my awesome co-hosts for this webinar. They're all going to offer something a little unique. Everybody kind of has their own approach to backpacking styles and gear. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of questions throughout all of this. So if you can just save it to the end, we have plenty of time set aside for questions at the end. You can ask general questions or you can address them to one of us in particular. Additionally, if you have to take off sometime in the middle, feel free to leave some questions in the YouTube comments, and we can answer those questions if you can't make it all the way to the end. So my guests today, first off, we have Dan Dursten, who is a very valued member of the Great Divide Trail Association. He's a huge advocate on behalf of the trail. He has a wildly successful gear company. If you've heard of Durston Gear, he's won basically every award you want to win. He's hiked the PCT and he completed the first yo-yo of the GDT. Secondly, we have Justin, who has the very popular YouTube channel, Justin Outdoors. This past year, he made an awesome series on his no-bow hike of the GDT. And for anybody looking at more info on how to do it fast, he did it in 36 days, which is insanely fast for a first-time no-bow through hike on the GDT. Finally, our third guest is Kelly McDonald, a new addition to the Great Divide Trail Association. He also runs a gear review YouTube channel called Two Guys in the Woods. He's hiked a lot of sections of the GDT, and we'll be chatting about some specific safety gear that you might want to consider bringing out on the GDT. So last year we hosted a gear webinar as well. It was people were really into it, so we knew we had to do it again this year. What we found is last year we kind of approached it through three different base weight styles. So somebody with an ultralight setup, someone kind of in the middle, and then someone with more of a traditional heavier weight setup. I know,
but my computer isn't set up.
We found that more people were interested in kind of the lighter weight thing, so we kind of took that approach this year. I'm interested to hear your feedback. So yeah, first up, we'll have Dan Dursten, who will be chatting a bit about what it's like hiking the Great Divide Trail with an ultralight setup. Dan, you want to take the show?
Yeah, hey guys, super stoked for everybody who's getting out there this year. It's an amazing trail. Like, you're going to have an amazing summer if you're hiking the whole trail, or if you're hiking a piece of it, whatever it is. Like, it's just going to be an amazing experience. So I'm going to talk a bit about hiking the GDT with an ultralight setup, kind of what are some of the kind of common things you do on ultralight, and some of the things that really specifically for the GDT are like good ideas and maybe not good ideas. So when we say ultralight, I want to be clear kind of what that is. So that is not unprepared or miserable or reckless. It is essentially what it is it's really honing in on exactly what you need, the functionality, the equipment that you need to have a safe, enjoyable hike, and then getting that in the most weight efficient manner. You're not carrying extra stuff. You're not carrying duplicated stuff. You're not bringing heavy versions of things. You're honing right in on the most weight efficient way to have a good hike. So I've got a couple slides here that I'll just talk through. Let me see. This might work. Okay, do you guys see that? Yeah, cool. Okay, so first of all, I made a gear list that you can grab, and maybe this could just be in the video description when this is on YouTube, but you can type in this gear list. You do need to put in that https:// thing at the start for it to actually work. And then it's just durstengear.com/gdt/gearlist.xlx, an Excel file. I'm going to show it here, but the actual gear list, you can like play with it, and there's extra comments and other examples and things like that in the gear list. And the goal of this gear list is to have everything you need for like a good hike. It's not anything crazy, like extreme. It's like super functional. You're not really giving up anything big. It's just a nice light gear list. Look at that. It even changed the slides. So actually like explaining how to like be an ultralight hiker would be like, you know, a month-long course or something. So I'm really going to hit the high level stuff on what this kind of looks like. And where that really starts is with essentially what's called your big three, which are your shelter, your sleeping bag, and your pack. Those are typically the three heaviest things you're going to have. And if you want to have any chance of being like ultralight or close to it, you really need to keep those three things under 2 pounds. So this gear list here, those are three of the first 4 lines, like a sleeping quilt, a shelter, your backpack. And then there's kind of a fourth thing, your sleeping pad, that's also kind of tends to be heavy. And you would really want to keep that one under 1 pound. So essentially, if those 3 items are under 2 pounds and that one item's under 1, you're at 7 pounds already. That's getting up there. So that's like, if you're actually at 7 pounds, you kind of have no chance of getting to 10 if you're at that. Like, but 2 would be like the upper limit for one thing. You would really want to be closer to like 1.5 pounds for those 3 things. And closer to like 3/4 pound for your sleeping pad. So I would have like a sleeping quilt that's like a -7. And I'm using basically like high expensive materials, like high quality down and light fabrics to make that light. It's still like a nice warm sleeping quilt. For a sleeping pad, I've got a Neo Air X Lite here. It's a good all around pad. There's a few other options in the spreadsheet. That's about 3/4 pound. And then for a tent, I've got one of my tents here. It's a 2-person tent. It's about like 1.5 pounds for a 2-person tent. And then a backpack. This is a 40-liter backpack. It's maybe a little small. You need a pretty compact kit to use a 40. A lot of people might like a 50. But basically what you're trying to think of here is like, what is something that's going to work for you in terms of functionality that is really within those range of these weight targets. Trying to get those big 3 around 1.5 pounds, and that pad definitely under 1 pound. So those are like your heaviest things probably. And then other things I would bring I like to bring a few waterproof stuff sacks to stay organized. I'd have one for my sleeping quilt to keep it dry, one for my clothes, one for just my small miscellaneous items, and then one for my pot to just hold the lid and the cup and the spoon and stove everything together. After that, I've got, I just drink out of a pop bottle, and then I have a platypus 2-liter bladder that is, you can just roll it up. So if you have a waterless stretch like Black Hulat Ridge in section A or a dry camp, you can bring extra water, but otherwise it's hardly even there. And then I use an alcohol stove, which is just like kind of cheap fuel from the hardware store. You can grab that and it kind of works in a pop can stove. Basically, it's super simple. I put that in a little pop bottle, and that's basically that's the last kind of like packing type of item that I have here in that category. And then for clothes, this is where a lot of people get off the rails because people bring too much clothes. You really want to think about what you're trying to do here. You're trying to stay warm. You're trying to like stay dry, keep the bugs away and not get eaten by the bush. You don't want to have like 5 shirts that all kind of work for something. You want to make sure you have like a solid plan for all of those things. And this clothing list isn't complete because a bunch of it's later under what I'm actually wearing. This is kind of the clothes I'm typically not wearing that often. So there's an extra pair of socks here. So I've got 1 extra pair of socks. I've got a short sleeve t-shirt that I might be hiking in or I might be sleeping in. I have like a long sleeve shirt, that's what I'm wearing, and a short sleeve shirt. And depending on the conditions, one I'm hiking in and one I'm basically sleeping in. A bug head nut's a good idea. You don't need it very much, but there's a couple brutal days where you'll be glad you had it. And then I like to have some hand kind of protection, like fleece mitts and a little waterproof mitt, because you get these brutally cold, snowy days. You wouldn't need this, but it's definitely nice to have. And then I've got a little hat. A common thing that you really want to get is like something warm enough for your jacket. Don't cut that too tight because it sucks when you're cold all summer. Make sure it's warm enough. I recommend something with like 4 or 5 ounces of down or equivalent weight in synthetic. And then I have some rain mitts and I have like decent rain gear. You're going to be wearing rain gear a lot, even if it's not raining, it's like the brush is wet, something like that. So it's nice to actually have decent rain gear. And then under this food and drink section, I've got basically my alcohol stove and just a tiny little pot for one person. It's like a little under 1 liter. And then I've got an Ursack for my food for bear storage. So I can just like, it's really easy. You can just like tie it to a tree and you're not like goofing around with bear bacon and all that kind of stuff. And then there's just a whole bunch of like miscellaneous stuff. And with a lot of this stuff, you're just being careful. Like you're not bringing a huge thing of sunscreen. You're bringing like what you need. For bug spray, I carry like a little dropper of 100% DEET. It's actually illegal in Canada, but it's amazing. You can get it on eBay from the States. Maybe it like shortens your lifespan, but at the time it's awesome. And then just like a little bit of camp suds to like wash up once in a while, a few other things, all your like little repair kits, like a mini first aid kit, a little tiny knife, your maps, and then a headlamp. You do not need like a huge headlamp because it's like the days are so long out there. Yeah, a little bit of something. And then you probably want a battery bank because you're out there so long, and a Garmin Inreach Mini for safety and communications. And then this last section here is just the worn stuff. So this is what I'm actually wearing. This is where I've got a long sleeve shirt that's going to be like bug proof. And then I've got the actual socks that I'm wearing, hiking poles, my phone, a watch, bear spray, long sleeve pants that are again like bug proof. It's just so nice to have a bug proof suit so that when the bugs are bad, you're just worrying about like your hands and your face with maybe a little bug dope or just swatting or whatever, but you're not like wearing a like t-shirt and like stretchy yoga pants where they bite through everywhere and it's just drives you nuts. And then lastly, I've just got trail runner shoes. I really like trail runner shoes because they're light and nice to use. So a couple just things that I already said, but I just really want to highlight is that for your clothing, you're really thinking about like your 4 main hazards, which are cold, bugs, bush, and wet. You don't need like a dozen shirts. You need ones that work. So I'd really suggest having long pants and a long sleeve shirt. People get crushed in shorts out there. Have good rain gear. Like don't skip the rain pants unless you're really rad. Make sure your jacket's warm enough or it's going to suck the whole time. And trail runners, like I like them. They're just so light and so nice, but they are going to get trashed. So have a plan for that. I did 3, like I'm cheap and I'm milking every mile out of those. I did like 2,000 kilometers on the PCT in 1 pair of shoes, and I still use 3 pairs on the GDT. They maybe weren't the best, they weren't the most durable shoes. I think you could usually do it in 2 pair, but you'd have to have like pretty good fortune to do it in 1 pair. Maybe it's how I hike too. Like I'm just like bushwhacking, like charging through stuff. I think my wife's T shoes lasted like twice as long because she's a little more graceful than me. So to just sum it all up, and like for going ultralight, some good ideas and some like not good ideas. Good ideas, like expensive materials like down, carbon fiber, titanium, light fabrics. Expensive might not sound good, but with something like a sleeping bag, you basically have a choice between expensive, heavy, or cold. You can't like have a light bag that was cheap and warm and everything like that. Like you do have to pay for those like lighter materials, and paying might not sound like fun right now, but when you're out on the trail, if you chose like heavy or cold, you're going to be kind of miserable. And then also just make sure you're only bringing what you need. You don't need like, I wouldn't bring like a camp chair and like all this kind of stuff. You don't need to have, you do need a raincoat. You don't need one with like 8 pockets. Anytime you can save weight through multi-use is great. For example, like hiking poles, if you use hiking poles, your tent could set up with hiking poles, and just like that, you're saving half a pound or more. And avoiding redundancy. Again, this is just like, if you have a clear use case for everything and you're like, this is for that and this is for that, then you're not just kind of throwing in stuff and hoping it's for something. Bad ideas that I wouldn't recommend are just having shorts, because you're going to get crushed by the bugs in the bush. Just being cold, that's going to get old. Skipping rain pants. As I said, just the wet brush in the morning, it's nice to have those on. Skipping bear spray, like don't be crazy. And bear bagging, it's kind of stupid light, because like it's a giant pile of work. The trees are so small and scrappy that you just can't find a good spot. So like, and you're tired, you're just going to not really end up doing it. Or if you do, it's like a 20-minute like project every night. And then lastly, debatable ideas. So these are some that could be a good idea, but it depends on where you're at. A single wall shelter doesn't protect you as much from condensation, but it can be good if you know how to use it and you have experience with it. I wouldn't say the GDT is the place to start for something like that, but if you know what you're doing, it can be fine. And lastly, the NeoAir Uberlight is a pad that's amazingly light.
Yeah,
I love them, but it's just like, you're probably not going to get through the trail on that thing. Like I've had a couple and they're always kind of like after 10 nights, they're leaking. Maybe you could do it. You could patch it up. I just think it's a bit sketchy for the GDT. And then lastly, this is just someone we met who only brought shorts, and they had just done the Amisqui in section D. And we met at them. I was like, oh my goodness, your legs are getting destroyed. So I like took a picture of their legs. So anyways, think about that stuff and like, be prepared. And that's kind of it for me. Good luck with the permits tomorrow. And also, yeah, there's a gear list that you could check out for more detail. And my wife T also has a gear list video that you could check out if you Google like Great Divide Trail gear list or something to turn up. Cool. Stop screen sharing.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And yeah, that YouTube series T Fox made is really awesome. If you guys are interested in seeing kind of like what sections look like, what the terrain looks like, and all that jazz. So yeah, that was kind of a good rundown of like, if you're trying to go light as possible, that's kind of what it might look like. I'd say definitely that's a minority of people that are going with like a 10-pound base weight. So don't feel pressure to fit that number if it's not your kind of style of hiking. Most people are definitely going to be over that. So now just get a kind of another perspective on it. Justin, you want to take it away and chat about what worked for you and how your hike went?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I definitely tried to push my pack to be as light as possible. I think relative to some of the stuff on Dan's list, I probably had a few more kind of luxury items that I brought with me just to make life on trail a little bit easier. I'm just gonna share my lighter pack in the chat here, so if anyone wants to follow along on there, that's my post GDT hike. So I did change some things out, and I'll talk about that a little bit here. But that's what I finished the trail with, and you can see at the bottom of that list the items that I added in Jasper. And I guess just for a bit of background, I'd never done a thru hike before hiking GDT. The longest I'd ever hiked was 7 days in a row. That being said, I've hiked a lot in that 2 to 4 day range. And a big thing for me with the GDT was bringing gear that I was familiar with. And I think that made a really big difference for me, and from other people that I met and saw. It was really, really important to be familiar with your gear before you got on the trail. Saw some issues with people having problems when you're tired and the conditions aren't ideal and you're trying to set up your tent or put your sleeping system together, or just make sure that you're using the right clothing at the right time. People would run into problems with that if they hadn't tested out their gear. So, well, I've seen people go out on some other long trails in the States that are maybe a little bit less intense than the GDT and get by with a brand new set of gear. I probably wouldn't recommend that for the GDT. And just kind of going through my gear list, I think I'll focus on some of the bigger items.
I'm not the only one having.
I'll focus on some of the bigger items, and then some of my favorites that I found the most useful while out on trail. And for those big items, and these are items that you'll probably see across a ton of different gear lists for thru hikers. Have like a lightweight quilt. Like I use the Enlightened Equipment quilt with 950 power fill down. I use a 20-degree Fahrenheit quilt, and I think that's probably a good sweet spot for the GDT. If you run cold, you probably want to get something that's a little bit warmer. And if you're crazy and run extremely warm, then you might be able to get by with a 30-degree quilt. But for me, I found 20 was good. When I got into September, I was maxing out my sleep system and all my clothing to keep warm at night when temperatures are getting down to about -6 degrees Celsius or colder. So just as a reference point there. But during the hot times of August, yeah, it was probably too warm in those temperatures. And then the Thermarest X-Lite, there's not really any pad out there I don't think there's a pad out there that you get that kind of warmth and that for that kind of weight. That's pretty comfortable. I got by. I had pretty good sleeps. But the X-Lite, you just can't beat it for weight and warmth. And then a pillow, I like having a pillow. That's kind of personal preference. So and then for my pack, I use the pack that you don't see very often, the Mountain Smith's Dirt 40. So it doesn't have a hip belt, but it has shoulder straps that are kind of like running vest style. So you can see them here. And I liked having all the pockets. I didn't really stop for lunches or breaks when I was out on the trail. So I could just pull anything I needed out of these pockets, and then these side pockets that were really easy to grab water out of as well. So for me, that was just a personal preference thing. For the pack, I've used it for a couple of years before the GDT. Very comfortable with it, allows me to move fast and is fairly lightweight. And like I said, just make sure it's stuff that you're comfortable with and have used, and try and get as lightweight as possible. I think on my starting weight was 12 pounds, and without cutting out some pretty key gear for me, it'd be really hard to get lower than that. Kind of moving into some of the things that I really liked. First of all, my tent, I use the Z-Pack Ultiplex. It's a single wall tent. And like Dan was saying, single wall tents can be a little bit more difficult to use if you're not used to them. A couple things I like about it is the weight and the fact that DCF doesn't hold on to moisture. And I personally like single wall because I can wipe down the condensation off the insides in the morning, and then I'm not carrying that weight throughout the day. Another thing that I really liked was that pack. And then something is probably kind of a personal choice item. A lot of people use Far Out, I forget what the old name was of the app. Now it's completely gone, but the Far Out app. What is it?
Oh no, sorry.
Sorry, John. Yeah, the Far Out app has a really good GDT trail pathway on it, as well as you can use people will comment on it, and then you can see their comments, so you know what the trail conditions might be like ahead of you, especially if there's several people that are like a week or two ahead of you. But I like using a watch that has mapping on it, and then you can load the GDT track onto that map. I loaded up a track for each day, and then each day I just followed my route. And for some sections where there's no trail, or you're doing a lot of bushwhacking, it allows you to stay on trail and move a lot faster than if you're having to pull your phone out all the time or be looking at your phone in order to navigate these sections. And that for me, like I went pretty fast, 36 days. I think that's an average of 30 kilometers, and the watch definitely helped me out with that. The other thing that was crucial for me was my footwear and foot system. And that was a piece of gear that I spent probably the most time agonizing over and trying to really dial in. I spent 2 years just kind of dialing in my footwear in order to avoid blisters, be able to move fast and not get foot fatigue or injuries while out on trail. And I was pretty lucky in that I only had one kind of injury scare, and that was due to road walking. So a piece of advice is you're going to hit a road, and if you've been moving fast, you're going to be able to move a lot faster, but that hard surface can cause a lot of damage to your body. So it's good to kind of try and keep the same pace that you've kept on trail while you hit the roads to avoid injury. Just a little tip, because I started getting shin splints after a couple long road walks. But the shoe that I used was the Hoka Speed Goats. So they just have a huge cushion on them, and then they have Vibra Mega Grip sole. But the cushion was really what was key for me, and it's like a slightly wider foot box than some other shoes, so it allowed my foot to kind of work well. It fit my foot. That's a key with footwear. But with the cushion, it really allowed my foot to not get fatigued over the course of the day. And the way I approached that was, before the trail, I trained a lot with more minimal shoes, less cushion shoes, walked around barefoot a lot in order to strengthen my foot. And then once I was on trail, I gave it that extra little bit of support. And the trail runners, they're not waterproof, like Dan said. That can be a blessing and a curse. There's tons of water courses that you're going through on the Great Divide Trail, and your feet are inevitably going to get wet. If you have trail runners, at least they dry a little bit faster and your foot breathes a little bit. If you're in boots, you're probably just going to be lugging a soaking wet boot instead of a soaking wet trail runners. That's going to be lighter. And then for socks, I use a really thin synthetic sock. I like synthetic socks because they hold on to less moisture, and I find just a little bit better for blisters for me than something like a wool sock. And then cotton socks, no way. But these are the Injinji socks with toes. So they have little mini socks for each of your toes, and that really helped with blisters for me. I was getting blisters in between my toes on really long days before the trail while training. Then once I used the Injinjis, it got rid of that completely. And my feet were wet for multiple days in a row, multiple times, and I didn't get a single blister on trail, which is pretty rare when your feet are that wet that often. A couple other little items. I use a sunscreen stick. I found it just easy just to whip out and put sunscreen on every morning, and a little battery pack. This is just a Spigen battery pack that charges stuff really fast and is small and light. It's the lightest and fastest charging one I could find out there. So if you're in town or you're stopping at like Saskatchewan Crossing and need to charge some stuff up, then it's good to have a fast charging battery pack like that. So that kind of goes over some of my favorite stuff. I just want to touch quickly on some of the stuff that I sent home and why or that didn't really work out for me, and some of my lessons learned from the trip. And one of the things that didn't work out for sure were the Cat B-free water filter. Mine clogged up after 5 days. The same one, for some reason, had lasted me hundreds of liters before that, and then just clogged up within a little bit on the GDT. And then I switched over to Platypus water filter, and it was fine for the rest of the trail. I also had a Rology ball, one of those cork balls that you can use for massaging. I sent it home because it just wasn't working out. I just wasn't using it, so it was just extra stuff that I was carrying along. And then some things that kind of didn't work out were my Frog Togs rain suit. So Dan mentioned several times having a good rain suit. The Frog Togs is a little bit of a debate. It's not a great rain suit. It's definitely on the cheaper end. It's $20 and it's not super durable. And my pants got shredded during section D through the Howes River Valley, through some of the shrubbery there. And other than that one section, I love them, and they kept me warm and dry. But I probably would have switched out to something a little bit more durable in field as far as rain gear goes. And then also had a pair of waterproof mitts that just weren't waterproof. So something I didn't test out and use in the rain beforehand. Kept my hands warm, but weren't waterproof. And then sunglasses weren't really the sunglasses fault, but I lost like 5 pairs of sunglasses on trail. And I've never lost sunglasses before in my life. So that was kind of a weird realization that I don't have an affinity for sunglasses on the Great Divide Trail and had to replace them all the time. But maybe having like a neck cord would have been useful in that sense. So I just wouldn't just put them down in random places and then leave them behind. And the one change that I would have made, as far as like resupply and adding gear at certain resupply points, was I probably would have sent some additional layers to myself in Jasper. I would have had some in my resupply box, some base layers, because I finished the trail at the beginning of September and temperatures were just tanking, and section F and G got really cold. You never really know with the Great Divide Trail, but the odds of it being colder as you enter into September are quite a bit higher. So I would have sent extra base layers, probably an extra pair of socks, because that's what I ended up picking up in Jasper. And then that more durable rain suit. And the challenges that I encountered with gear really had to do with like sustained rain and cold. When you encounter like 3, 4, 5 days of rain and snow and cold in a row, your stuff starts getting wet, starts getting damp. You're gonna lose the insulative properties of anything that is wet, and especially down products. So something to keep in mind is always just having a buffer, especially as you're getting into those more remote sections. If you know that with all your clothing on and your sleep system, you're comfortable down to a certain temperature, definitely have a buffer there, especially for sections F and G, because it can get cold in there later in the season. And make sure your footwear is dialed in. Definitely test out footwear. Like Dan said, he went through 3 pairs of shoes. I think that might have been on the yo-yo. I'm not quite sure, but I went through 3 pairs of shoes just heading northbound. So that's probably a decent bet for the trail for you. And just make sure that your footwear is dialed in. That's everything for me.
Cool, thanks, Justin. All right, guys. So I know at least last year, a big question after I saw kind of the gear review webinar was like, what does a lot of this terrain look like? Like, what's a campsite going to look like? What is part of the trail going to look like? When we're talking about river crossing, what does that look like? So I'm just going to share this few slides here just to give you an idea on what it looks like. I would say this image is going to be what a ton of sites look like, where it's not necessarily a designated park site, but somebody's been there, whether it's been horse campers or it maybe parks used to take care of it and it's no longer within kind of the area that parks takes care of. So, I mean, a lot of spots where it's somewhat treed. Anyway, I was just like, what's a characteristic of a GDC campsite? That's pretty much it. Just want to say there are certainly plenty of trees here, but if you're thinking about hammock camping, I would strongly urge against it. There are a couple sections, particularly in section E, where you're not allowed to hammock camp. And there's going to be some spots where either you're going to be kind of in too much brush, maybe where you can't get a hammock set up, or you're going to be in subalpine or alpine where you won't be able to hang a hammock. Again, here's a campsite with some people we met on trail. Most of them will have spots like this where you have room to kind of throw your stuff out, let it dry once you get rained on. Like here in this example, we're all wearing our rain gear and it's not raining. That is for bugs. I highly suggest bringing a bug net for your head. It weighs like a few grams and it saves you your peace of mind. And then kind of here are some not very good sites, but these are not very common. So this is a site just at the end of section A. There are going to be some of those days where, like particularly in section B, where you don't have to make a reservation. So you can, if you're trying to push it, sometimes you can push a little further. On this evening, we tried to push further and we didn't really make it to where we wanted to end up going. So this is not a very normal campsite, but just want to know that sometimes there might be a day where you're not in a very ideal campsite. Again, this is kind of the ideal campsite, but just thinking about if you are going to be camping in a spot like this, especially if you're using a non-freestanding tent, make sure you really know how to set that thing up. Like the wind got whipping here pretty quick in a hurry in the middle of the night. And if any weather rolled in, you'd be so exposed up here. So just make sure that you really know how to set your tent up super well. And again, like here, I mean, the tent I was using at that time requires 6 stakes. We had it set up with 8 there just in case it did get windy, but it's never been a problem to get stakes in if you're using a non-freestanding tent, but just the importance of knowing how to set it up. As we kind of chatted about tents before, some tents are better than others for the GDT. The tent we started with, it was really hard. It's really hard to get the fly pitched super low. Some tents pitch particularly low in the vestibule. So in this, like we could have shortened our poles to make the tent sit a little lower and the vestibule would have gone closer to the ground, but then the floor on the tent would have been pretty much flat. So this night, this was in section B, it poured all night, big thunderstorm, and we were getting wet inside the tent because it was just splashing down on the outside of the tent and all this mud was coming in. If you've done like the CDT or something, this might be familiar, but just a heads up, like really find out how to dial that tent down because you don't want to be finding out at 2 a.m. when it's pouring rain on you. And then again, regarding footwear, so this is a picture from section D. You're going to cross the river like 100 times, at least. And then again, in F and G, you're going to be getting wet a lot too. So if you are going to be wearing boots, some kind of footwear, unless you want to get your boots wet. I know most people really don't want to because boots tend to be waterproof and take a long time to dry, which is Blister City. If you are going to be bringing boots, I highly suggest you bring some kind of footwear to cross rivers in. I know that it's it doesn't sound very nice to have to bring a second pair of shoes. I think all of us here are highly going to suggest bringing a pair of trail runners because they're just going to drain throughout the day. They'll be dry. You're not going to have a puddle inside your shoes the same kind of way you will with boots. But yeah, if you are wearing boots, you are probably going to want to pop them off before crossing this versus if you're in trail runners or something, you just run right across the water without worrying about it. And then also, I just want to kind of iterate that the GDT is exceptionally hard on gear. One of our buddies that we were hiking with had a really light kind of trail running style fast packing pack that was definitely more catered to being on trail. And then this is a picture, it's either an F or G, I can't remember which. And just kind of going through the brush, climbing over these logs. Stuff is going to get ripped. I ripped my hiking pants to shreds in this section. So just kind of going into this, knowing that some of the clothes that you're wearing might be completely destroyed, no matter how much you love them. And that like your quilt, your sleeping pad, those kinds of things won't necessarily get the same kind of wear, but the clothes you're wearing, the shoes you're wearing, and your pack are all going to have like a lot of abrasion from like sliding under these logs, climbing over them. What happened to me is like one little end on that log went into my leg and I jumped off and it ripped my pants from knee to the bottom of the pants. And I was dealing with that for 10 days. And finally, river crossings. Pretty sure this is Chown, which is in between F and G. This is kind of a middle of the road crossing. There aren't that many this high. There's a lot that are a lot lower. This one, as you can see, it's about knee. And there's going to be a few that are likely going to be higher. Just to kind of put a perspective in this, I know when I was thinking about river crossings, I really didn't have a good image in my mind and what that might look like. And if you haven't crossed a river before, knee high is pretty strong. Once you get I'd say it's pretty much impossible to cross a river if it's at waist or above. It's just so much water is pushing against you that even if it's only knee deep, like you're leaning forward with your weight. Highly suggest everybody use trekking poles. It's super helpful. At least bring one just so you can like lean forward into that water a lot without falling over. And then regarding some of my gear, so I hiked the trail with my partner Tanya. Not sure what the breakdown is going to be for everybody here, but I think if you're hiking as a pair, definitely share gear. It saves room in your pack. It saves room. It saves weight. Some of the things that we did. So I have my lighter pack link as well that I can post. I think it's here at the bottom. So here's mine. So things that we shared our cooking pot. You can spend a lot on these, or you can just find them on Amazon for not very much money. And I think they're probably made in the same factory. We found 1,200 or 1,250 mils was fine for the two of us. We made all our own food. I know sometimes if you are buying the prepackaged food, it takes quite a bit of water, but for our kind of food setup, 1,250 was plenty, about a liter of water. So our meals took 400 to 500 mils of water. And then in here fits the stove and the gas can fits. From that, just to kind of keep it, because that's titanium. It's like the most stick pan you could ever imagine. So putting any food in there is going to be a bad time, and you're going to be eating that food for the rest of the section. I know in the States, it's really popular. People get the gelato containers. You can find them here too. There we go. It's expensive gelato, but it's a good reason to go buy expensive gelato. Really loved having this. It's nice having a screw lid. So, I mean, like I use soap like at the end of the section, but besides that, I mean, just put a little water in there, shake it up with the lid on, drink it down. It sounds grosser than it is. And it was nice having this just to know that everything's screwed on. I'm not going to have any like food smells leaking out or anything. And then from the hardware store, I went and got this stuff. It's like that kind of bubble wrap material, but silver. And I found just putting this around the bowl. I put my food in there, pour the water on it, and just having a little bit of insulation, I found kept it from cooling down, especially on those days. And then it would just rehydrate in the cup, give it 10 minutes with the lid on, and then it's good to go. So usually we would just boil some water, pour it in there, set up the tent, and then afterwards we're good to go. A couple other things that I found were super helpful. I got a bidet probably like mid-trip somewhere. I started off with one that a buddy used as a 3D printer and made, but it was pretty long. But then I just got this one. I think it's called Backcountry Bidet. I mean, it's basically the size of the cap of a water bottle. It was awesome. It's so nice not having to pack out your toilet paper. If you aren't aware, you have to pack out your toilet paper unless there is a toilet that you find. So for some of those sections like F and G, where you might not see a toilet for over a week, like that's a lot of toilet paper I don't really want to pack out. So having this saves so much toilet paper. I still brought a little bit just to kind of, I mean, dry your butt afterwards, because it's not very nice having a wet butt, but this will get almost all of it done. And then I just got one of those classic crappy water bottles, just as a separate water bottle. Sharing the water bottles kind of, I don't know, do it if you want, but it's not for me to be drinking out of that water bottle later. Couple other things that I found: there's no need to have a fork, spoon, and a knife. One spoon will do it. Again, just some Amazon cheap titanium spoon. Long handle's nice, so then you're not getting your hands dirty. And that was the only utensil I brought for the whole trail. Water filters. Last year, I saw a lot of people with kind of the old school, like pump water filters. Please save yourself the time and life that you won't get back and just buy something like we used a Sawyer squeeze. We started with the micro, but then a bunch of people I know had the squeeze and it was going like 4 times faster. So, I mean, they're $40, $50 maybe if you're in Canada. In the States, they're cheaper, but I mean, this thing will get a liter done in like a minute, maybe 2 minutes once it's old. I mean, sitting there pumping with a giant water filter that weighs a pound and just sitting there squeaking. When I found this, like you can just put it on the top of your water bottle, fill it up. You don't have to always bring a liter. So in sections where there's a ton of water, you can just fill up 500 mils and just keep filling up those 500 mils. And you're only dealing with a pound of water rather than packing 2 liters where now you have almost 5 pounds of water. Couple other little things. I think Justin and I had the same rain mitts, the Outdoor Research Helium mitts. They're inside out right now. These are garbage. Don't buy them. I found my hands got soaking wet right away. I had the same rain pants. I know those are really popular. The whole Helium series is super popular on the PCT and some other trails where you won't get the same kind of rain, but those were my rain pants. They kept the bugs out, and that was about it. Everything else I was getting absolutely soaked through. If I was walking through any like dewy brush in the morning, it was going right through the pants. It did keep the wind off, but if you are going to be spending money on rain pants, I would not spend your money on those rain pants. Just a couple other things. We'll chat way more about this in 2 weeks when we have our food webinar. But I brought, how big is this? 16 ounce, just a little platypus thing, collapsible little water bottle to put olive oil in. It's an easy way to get your calories up. Basically, I put olive oil in every single thing I ate. This thing doesn't weigh that much by itself. And it's nice, it didn't leak. So I was trying to figure out how I could transport some kind of liquid like oil without having every single thing in my bag slimy. Yeah, this thing was great. I would go through just under 16 ounces per section. Highly suggest it. I have the link in that lighter pack. If you're looking to also bring olive oil to add to your meals, this one worked great. It didn't leak. And the last two things, a couple things that I found were super helpful is in some sections, you're going to have wet feet for probably like a week. And it's pretty nice that when you get to camp, you can put like your sleep clothes on, your dry base layers, your puffy. And when you're just hanging out around camp, it's not that nice to have wet, muddy feet. So Charlene, who was in the last webinar, told me this trick. She just brought like these gallon-sized Ziploc bags and cut the zip part off the top. And this is the world's cheapest waterproof socks. So basically I would just like usually take the socks off. My feet would be kind of damp. I would dry them the best I could and then toss on my sleep socks, put these on, and then put my feet back into my shoes. It's an easy way to avoid having to buy camp shoes for the price of 2 Ziploc bags. They will get kind of condensation-y in there because you just have a big plastic bag around your feet. But for how cheap they are and how easy they were, it was awesome. You might want to resupply them halfway through. I didn't use them that much until sections F and G, but my partner used them like pretty frequently. So yeah, I just thought that was like the ultimate tip that she gave me. And last thing that I found was pretty helpful, these smell-proof bags. We were using an Ursac. The middle size, I don't know how many liters it is, but the middle size Ursac was the, we each had one, and that was completely fine, except for F and G. I found it was a pretty tight stretch. So we had one of the smallest Ursacs that we sent to ourselves in Jasper. And so just having that little bump up, we shared that. So one is good for you pretty much the whole way, except for that last section. You might be able to do it if you squeeze it in there. Hold it up again. Oh yeah, it is. I'll send you the link for it. I know this is mainly just a peace of mind thing. Like it's, the Ursac will keep the bears out, but just knowing that maybe they can't smell it, maybe they can, but just that placebo effect of knowing just to try to keep scents down was really nice. 2 of these will fit in one of those medium-sized Ursacs. There's a few companies that make them. The Ursac company makes them, but I found they're quite expensive. Like I see the OpSac one, those ones are kind of pricey, I think. These ones, I think they're actually made for substances that are illegal in some countries that keep the scent down. So this one, it's very green, if you know what I mean. And but they're way cheaper. So you can get like a pack of 10 of them for like $10. Also the Coghlan's ones, I was surprised. My partner had those, and they typically make pretty low price budget camping gear. And she had a couple of those bags and they worked great. I will say that definitely treat these as a disposable item. I had 2 in each resupply box. Realistically, the Ziploc is going to fail on them pretty quickly. So I found every section I was just resupplying a new bag. It's kind of wasteful, but you might be able to get 2 sections out of it, but just opening and closing that bag every day, that zip is going to go. And yeah, then just to chat about some of the things in my lighter pack setup. I think all of us here, we all used quilts. I had never owned a quilt before the trail, but really happy I made the switch to it. I've had sleeping bags before, but I found I slept way better. Like if you toss and turn, a quilt gives you way more room to toss and turn without being stuck in your own little cocoon. NeoAir X-Lite, pretty much the standard. I had a Hyperlight pack, which was nice. The backpack is waterproof, like it's not submergible, but it is Dyneema, so water is not necessarily going through the fabric. That being said, I still did line my backpack with basically a giant trash compactor bag. Small tip, I would definitely go for a white one or a clear one. It makes stuff way easier to see. I know a lot of those trash compactor bags are black, and at night, if you're searching through your bag with a headlamp or it's dark or something and it's black, it's really hard to see stuff. If it's white, everything's going to reflect on there way more. Yeah, a couple other things that power bank. So I was charging my watch, a GoPro, my phone, and an Inreach Mini, and I found 10,000 milliamp hours was plenty. Some people are going to bump it up to 20. Luckily, I was sharing it with my partner, so she also had a 10,000. So I guess I was probably using more than 10,000 because I could share her power. But I found, airplane mode, power saver on everything. 10,000 worked fine for me. I was coming out of the trail with power on all my devices. Just going through a couple other things. Simple little things, like I basically bought all new cables for my devices. You don't need a 8-foot long phone charger. I found I just got like the USB-C ones from Amazon or whatever, cheap ones. And I mean, I got all the cords like a foot long, which was nice. It just makes it way better. I kept all my devices, like all my electronics in a fanny pack, and just not having like wires and wires everywhere, having one. I know some, they like split into 3, but sometimes I charge 2 things at once. So just little simple things, like it was worth just buying an extra phone charger just for that. And yeah, one other thing I bought for the trail that I'd never really used before. Usually I'm a shorts and a t-shirt hiking kind of guy. In Jasper, you can definitely send your shorts home. Like even if it's nice out, you're gonna have your shorts on all the time anyway. There's no real reason, I think, to pack shorts once you're going past Jasper. And then also, which I did not think I'd necessarily need in the Canadian Rockies, is I wore a sun hoodie. I bought it exclusively for Section A because when we started, it was like the crazy heat wave that we had here. And I don't really like wearing sunblock. I don't like packing that one extra thing and having to put greasy stuff all over my skin. So I'd rather just cover myself up. So I got the Patagonia Tropic Comfort, and I love that thing so much that I brought it through the whole trip. Just to have something. It was good for bugs. Like bugs could still get through if they tried, but just having that extra layer to kind of shake them off was awesome. So having something long sleeve for the whole trip is awesome. Like I found I could push the sleeves up if I needed to. I still had a t-shirt for those like really hot days where I just needed to kind of like vent out, but definitely suggest having something long sleeve pretty much the whole way through the trip. And then, yeah, that link's there. If anybody has any questions on gear in particular, let me know. One last thing, my partner sleeps quite a bit colder than me. So she had a 10 degree, the Enlightened Equipment Enigma 10 degree. And she was very happy she had it. It was kind of like she just knew that there was always that safe place where no matter how cold or wet or whatever happened during the day, like you climb in, you get into the tent and you're just like, that's your safe zone. And she knew she was never going to be cold. And yeah, she loves it. She loves it a ton. And then just going to take one last peek through here. I will say that, so in my previous hikes, in like kind of those 2 to 4 day sections, I'm typically in that below 10 pound range, but for this hike I was over. So it's quite hard, I think, to stay really comfortable with like a 7 pound base weight. I know some people have done it, but I think the GDT in particular, and just being out for that amount of time, you might be finding that you're going to be packing some things that you normally would. Like I would never normally pack rain pants, but I just knew being out for 12 days straight in a stretch, like if you're getting cold and wet, there's not really a chance to bail. Like you're not just going to go home because it starts raining. Also in section A, I was going to bring a fleece. I found I never needed it, and I wasn't ever going to use it, so it got sent home. I found that just between a t-shirt, that sun hoodie, and my down puffy, my rain jacket, that was enough to kind of make everything happen. If it was super cold, sometimes I wear my base layers for sleeping for like the first 20 minutes of hiking, just to shake off that cold in the morning, and then I'd change. And then, yeah, also wanted to mention the headlamp. I know there's a lot of kind of blogs or things out there where people say that they never needed a headlamp on the GDT. I would strongly advise against that. The days are super long. You're going to be like, the sun's up for so much time. Like there was quite a few days though, where either we were trying to beat the heat and we were leaving well before it got bright out, or if you're trying to hike later into the night just to make it happen, like definitely suggest bringing a headlamp. But I think as Dan was saying, you don't need like a BMW high beam on your head. Like a lot of it's pretty bushy if you're going to be hiking at night, and you don't really need to see that far. Having a light cannon on top of your head isn't necessarily going to be that helpful. I just had a Petzl Tika, like a $30 headlamp, and I found that was completely fine. And then now we're going to pass it off to Kelly, and he's going to chat specifically about some of the electronics a lot of people bring on trail.
Thanks, Austin. So one thing that you probably heard both Dan and Austin mention is the Inreach Mini. One thing that I'd really recommend that folks take with them on the trail is some kind of Sac communicator. The trail is remote, and the vast majority of the time you are not going to have cell coverage. And this is including places that you think are more developed and near the highway, like Saskatchewan Crossing. There's no cell coverage. So because of that, and some areas where you may not see another hiker for a couple of days, if something were to happen, it's a good idea to have some kind of way to communicate or call for help if necessary. One thing to bear in mind is that none of the jurisdictions along the GDT charge for search and rescue. So whether that's Parks Canada, Kananaskis Public Safety, RCMP, whomever, there is no, if you need help, they're not going to send you a bill afterwards. Now there are a couple different kinds of Sac communicators, and like I've seen this question come up a lot of times as to, well, what's the best kind? What should I take? There's the Spot, there's the Inreach, there's PLBs, and they all have kind of their own advantages and disadvantages. So I'm just going to share my screen, and we can show a couple pictures of what some of these will look like. So what I've got on the screen here, so this is an example of a PLB, or personal locator beacon. These are essentially your big red button in the backcountry. You open the little cover right here, you hit the button, and it'll send a notification out to, actually in Canada, it'll send it out to Trenton, Ontario, and it'll call the cavalry to come and get you. The advantage of these is that there's no subscription. You buy the unit, and they're about $400 to $600 Canadian, and that's it. You don't have to pay a monthly subscription. But the limitation is all they do is they call for help. That's it. You press the button, and that's so they don't have check-in, they don't have tracking. All they do is call for help. These are a one-way device, so you don't get a confirmation back that they've received your signal. But because of the frequencies and the satellites that PLB uses, they're quite reliable. These are kind of the same technology that goes into like marine rescue or aircraft that in the event of an accident will be used to call for help. So these are probably the simplest, pretty straightforward, easy to use, but they're kind of one purpose device. The next category are devices like Spot. So this is a Spot Gen 4. I used a Spot Gen 3 for a number of years. And these are one-way communicators. So they're pretty small, they're pretty lightweight. They have a little button here. You can see, you flip it open and you can call for help. So you got your SOS button. But they also have a few other features. So you can have some predefined messages to check in, to say that you're okay, to let family or friends back home that you made it into camp, as well as they have tracking. So if people want to vicariously follow where you are at any particular point in time, you can hit the tracking button, and you can pre-program it to send every hour, every half hour, every, I think even as little as 5 or 10 minutes if you want. These units are about, I think the Spot right now is about $190 Canadian. So the unit itself is not that expensive. The subscriptions, for some reason, Spot only charges in US dollars. It's about $12 to $16 or US dollars a month. Depends what kind of subscription package you get. On the more expensive side, you're going to get more tracking options. You can send more messages. One thing that they have introduced, and this is something that Inreach has done for a while, that Spot has kind of picked up on, is there's some of the more expensive monthly subscriptions give you the option to kind of turn the subscription on and turn it off. So if you're not using it throughout the whole year, you can turn it on for a few months in the summertime, and then you can kind of turn your subscription off in the wintertime when you're not using it. Again, these are pretty simple to use. One of the downsides I find with the Spot is it is a one-way unit, right? So you press the button and the message goes up to the satellites, and sometimes it gets through, sometimes it doesn't. They're not quite as reliable as the PLBs for the signal going through. And I know I had a couple of times when I would use my Spot that either it would be delayed, it would take a while for messages to go through, or sometimes just a message would never seem to make it through to the other side. But again, they're small, they're lightweight, and they're fairly easy to use. The next are two-way satellite communicators. So the one on the screen here, this is an Inreach Mini. Probably the two most popular brands of the two-way communicators are the Inreach and the Zoleo. I use an Inreach. Mine is actually, I don't use the Mini, I actually use the GPS Map 66i. So it's a combined Inreach and a GPS unit. It's a bit bigger, it's a bit heavier, but it also has all the features of a GPS. The Inreach, they kind of range. So for example, the Inreach Mini is about $450. So the Inreaches are a little bit more expensive. Subscriptions are anywhere from $25 a month to about $80 a month. On the $80 side, it's unlimited messaging, unlimited tracking. You can send as much as you want. Because they are two-way, whenever you send a message, you'll get a confirmation. So you'll get that the message was received and it did go through. As well, people can message back, right? So they can respond, they can send you notes. Sometimes that's a disadvantage if you're on the trail and you want to be remote and isolated and you don't want people to be able to get a hold of you. But still, it is the option. I know, this summer I was out on a backpacking trip, had a family emergency back at home, and I unfortunately had to get off trail to deal with that. But because I had my Inreach, I was not only able to find out that there was a bit of an emergency, but I was able to coordinate a friend to come up and pick me up at the trailhead I was getting out at. So I find it to be really, really handy. Another nice thing about the two ways is you can also request weather reports. So this is great if you're on a long stretch of trail where you may not have a weather report for 2 or 3 days, a week, even on some of the longer stretches. You can always hit the button and it'll give you a couple days what weather is going to be forecast for the next few days based on your location. the mini by itself, I mean, you have your screen and there's a bit of functionality. It has a little bit of navigation capability built into it, so you can load not so much maps, but it'll give you a little compass arrow kind of showing where you need to go to get to your destination and how far away it is. The Zolios are cheaper. So the Zolio is about $270. Monthly subscriptions are about the same price. They use the same satellite network as Inreach. So a lot of that functionality is very similar. The main difference between the Inreach and the Zolio is you can use a Zolio standalone, but it's very limited, that you can send a pre-programmed message, call for help. But if you really want to use it as a messaging device to be able to send instant messages back and forth, you really need to pair it with a smartphone. The Inreaches you can use more standalone, but like the keyboards that are built into them, like the digital keyboards, aren't very good. It's much easier and much faster to type using your smartphone. So I recommend both ways. You'd still want to pair them with a smartphone. Bear in mind that even though they are two-way devices, it isn't quite like instant messaging back and forth with your regular phone. Depending on where the satellites are at any particular point in time, and how much you can see the sky, it sometimes can take a little while for a message to go through and a response to come back. Other times, if you've got a satellite right above you, you can have almost real-time messaging back and forth, but still not quite as fast or responsive as the what you expect with just texting at home. Spot does also make a two-way device called the Spot X. It's about $350. Their subscriptions are also in the sort of the $12 to $40 US, so a little bit cheaper on the subscription side. It looks like almost like an old style BlackBerry. Like it actually has a little keyboard on the front of it. I've heard mixed reviews. It doesn't use the same Iridium network as Inreach and Zolio. So I've heard some people have some challenges with coverage. In North America, the coverage is pretty much solid regardless, but there are some places where the Global Star network, which is what Spot uses, doesn't quite have the same responsiveness. The last and probably the Cadillac of Sac Communicators is an outright satellite phone. They're not cheap. They're about $1,000 for a phone. Plus you need a subscription plan. Plus you need minutes. I haven't seen many people carrying full-on sat phones, but it is an option if you really want to be able to reach out and touch someone when you're on the trail. That is a potential if you want that. Like I said, probably the most common ones you're going to see on the trail are probably the Inreach Mini or the Zolio. That's becoming more and more popular. Spots used to be really popular, but I'm kind of seeing less and less of them on the trail just because of the two-way nature of Inreach or Zolio. That's really it. That little spiel I wanted to give on those devices, because like I said, I see a lot of questions on the boards about, well, which one should I get and what types are there and what's the advantage or disadvantage, and more than happy to answer any questions folks might have.
Awesome, thanks, Kelly. And like we had last time, we just have a quick questionnaire. There's 4 questions on there. Just curious, kind of about who you guys are, kind of what your experience is, where you're, what you're doing on the GDT this year. This one in particular, we asked a bit about what your backpack normally weighs, just so we can get an idea. Like if we find everybody is within a certain category or a huge range of people are within a certain weight of backpack, we can in the future kind of adjust it to maybe make it a little more applicable. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind doing that. And then also just a little suggestion box if there's anything else on any webinars you're dying to hear. So 2 weeks from today, we'll have one on food. So that'll be kind of meal prepping, some resupply tips, what's available at each of the resupply locations. We'll have a guest who's dehydrated a lot of their own food. I'll be chatting on that one too, about if you're keen to set up all your own food for the whole trip, or some options about assembling, because I know some of the ingredients can be a little bit harder to find in Canada. And then in a month from today, we're going to have a physiotherapist on. She hiked the Great Divide Trail 2 years ago, and we're going to talk a little bit about pre-trail fitness, some injury prevention, some kind of tips that she has for that. And that'll be a month from now. Besides that, if anybody has any questions, let her rip.
I've got a question. There are numerous people from a group who shall remain nameless who are wondering about the Durston Kakwa 40 seen on Dan's gear list. We're wondering if that was something he was prepared to talk about today. You're on mute.
All right, unmuted. Yeah, that's the new 40-liter pack coming out in 2 months.
Woohoo!
Just
All right.
Just an update. It's a whole new pack.
We're very excited to see it. If you want to share pictures of that anytime or as a follow-up to anybody who attended tonight, I'm sure there would be people who might be willing to receive that.
Okay.
Maybe one thing I'll just quickly add, I forgot to mention with the two-way devices, and one of the advantages is if something were to happen on the trail and you did have to call for help, one of the things that the search and rescue folks really appreciate about two-way is that they can actually have a bit of a conversation with you about, okay, well, why are you calling? Is it because you tripped, fell, and have a compound fracture in your femur and they need to get out to you right away? Or is it you're cold or stranded or lost, and they can kind of triage appropriately, as well as help guide you in what kind of response is happening. So that's just one little additional benefit of the two-way communicators.
Hey, so really appreciate all of the gear lists. Really, really cool. Just a question for you guys. Did you take any luxury items? And if so, tell us about them. What was indispensable just to keep your wits about you on the long trail?
For my partner, it was a pillow. She brought a pillow. I shunned her for it, but she was happy she brought it.
I would say that a pillow is an essential item for me these days. I think a luxury item that I brought to was an extra pair of socks and an extra pair of underwear, and I'd rotate them out each day and then dry them off on the back of my pack. And especially the socks, I'd rinse them out every day, and I think that helped with blister prevention as well, because they weren't filled with mud and dirt and grime, and my feet weren't making me want to die every time I got in my tent with them. So that was a nice luxury item.
Those guys are just soft with their pillows. I just take my stuff sack from my clothes, and whatever clothes aren't like disgusting, I put in there and sleep on it. The pillows are nice too, but I don't use one. I do like to have a little bit of a book. I got a guidebook to like plants, and I like ripped out all the parts I didn't want and I glued it back together to make it like a quarter of its size. And then it gave me something to do. I'd like pick little flowers, and then evening I'd kind of figure what they were.
That's awesome. Thanks.
I had a quick question. So Dan was talking about the earth sack, and I was curious, that doesn't have to be tied up. You can just tie it around a tree, and that's good to go.
Yeah, the idea is that a bear can't rip through it. There are a few cases where they have succeeded. We had a bear chew on ours on the GDT. I remember coming up in the morning and like the food is kind of all busted up, and there's like kind of these teeth marks on the bag. And for a while I didn't get it. I was like, why is everything broken? Was there like a mouse in here? But there's like nothing was chewed, it was just broken. And then finally I put it in. But yeah, you could just tie it to something that, because the bear could grab it and walk off. Where the nice thing with the bear can is they can't, because they would need to. With a bear can, they can't walk off with it. So you have to tie it. There's actually got to tie it, but then they're way lighter. So it just packs way nicer.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do you recommend like the Almighty or just the Ursac Major? Like, is it just the bears or is it the mini bears too?
I use my smelly proof bags to kind of keep the mini bears away. I never had a problem with my, like a lot of times it'd be pretty close to the ground. Usually I just tie it like 3 feet high just to make it a little bit harder, but we didn't have any mini bears getting in. And if people don't know what mini bears are, that'd be like any kind of rodent. So a mouse, a pika, a marmot, anything like that. Just those smelly proof bags with the regular ones seem to work fine.
Thanks.
If you're, yeah, don't plan to leave your boots, anything that if you were wearing anything with leather or cork outside. I've had cases where porcupines will feast on the salt on them. And that's one of the reasons why I switched to a hiking pole tent, because now my hiking poles are inside with me.
I see there's a couple questions in the chat too. So my buddy that had the fast packing pack, did they go with an ultralight tent setup or a bivy? Yeah, they started with a tarp and a bivy, and they lasted all of section A. And in that section, we didn't have a day of rain. It was just with bugs and all that, they had nowhere to hide. Like if you're in a bivy, you're just in a coffin basically. So he didn't have a spot to like stretch without getting attacked by bugs. At the end of section A, he went out and bought a tent. And then he kept the tarp for a little bit, but then eventually he just got rid of it. That was definitely a huge luxury item for all of us to, if it was raining, we could throw the tarp up and all hang out under there and eat lunch. But it's hard to be in a bivy with a tarp or a hammock on the GDT in particular. And then there was one other question: is a bear can like the BV 500 a bad call? Bear cans are just really heavy and they're huge. Like they don't get smaller the more you eat food. They're hard, so like it's just a weird sized item. I really liked. I mean, it's certainly going to be safe and you don't have to worry about mice or anything. But I found having an Ursack was so nice because it just, you can really feel your pack getting smaller. And then for some of those sections where you're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 days long, like by day, when you're only 2 days from town, your backpack's pretty tiny. So it was nice kind of making those 2-pound progress days every day, eating the food. And with a bear can, it just doesn't feel like you're making that same kind of progress. And then, I mean, this is not scientific, it's just somewhat anecdotal. Like I know on the PCT, they're requiring bear cans. It seems that the bears are much more habituated in the Sierra than they are in the Rockies. Like I know in Yosemite, bears are like ripping car doors off. It's pretty unlikely that you won't have a bear encounter if you're hiking the full GDT. But at least from my experience, we saw some bears, but we didn't have any bears get into our food at all. And I even thought that the Ursack would be kind of roughed up from the previous night, but that didn't even happen a single night. And sometimes there would be a bunch of us camping together, but that's definitely anecdotal. Did anybody have a wind layer? Did not. I found that t-shirt and my sun hoodie I had on pretty much the whole way through the trail. And then I find sometimes I'll bring a wind layer like in the summer on hikes if I know it's not going to rain. Like if I'm just going out for a weekend hike and it's going to be 35 degrees Celsius all weekend, like I'm going to risk it and not bring a raincoat. But because I was already bringing a rain jacket, I didn't want to bring one extra item. So the rain jacket worked to stop all the wind.
Yeah, a rain jacket's like your lightest way of doing it for like bugs and wind, but it's like if you end up wearing it a lot, you're like, maybe you should get something more comfortable. So you can do a wind shirt, but if you have a long sleeve hiking shirt, that also does like the wind and the bugs. So that's kind of what my main thing was the long sleeve hiking shirt, and then adding the rain jacket only when it's raining.
William, I just saw your question about reposting the gear lists. Oh, people already got to it. I'm just behind on the chat. What bugs are we dealing with? A lot of mosquitoes and then kind of no-see-ums. I didn't really see that many black flies. There's a lot of black flies in like northern BC, but just a lot of mosquitoes and kind of no-see-ums. And then also there's a lot of bugs that don't bite, but they're just going to drive you crazy.
Yeah.
And I find it varies a lot from summer to summer. I mean, the last 2 summers I've found have been really good for bugs. I mean, they're still always out there. But, you know, the summer before that, you know, you're just getting devoured. So, you know, sometimes it's a bit of a roll of the dice between whether it's the horse flies or the mosquitoes or the little gnats that are out there.
And then did you all permethrin your gear? I did not. Did you guys do any treatment for your clothing?
Never.
No, I haven't either.
Could be good. I haven't tried it.
I use a lot of the Wind River that has the embedded permethrin in them. They seem to work really well.
Was there good consensus on a good rain jacket? I mean, I had a 3-layer Gore jacket. Some people might think that's overkill. It's the jacket I had. It is exceptionally light, I think, for a 3-layer Gore-Tex jacket. I was happy I brought it. You could probably get away with like some cheaper, less expensive ones. I do like that jacket's pretty burly. Like I didn't have to worry about tearing it. Dan, what jacket did you use on your hikes?
I had a little super light 3-layer black diamond. I think like no matter what, you're gonna get wet eventually. It's just how fast you're getting wet and if you can be warm when you're wet. I wouldn't like plan on being dry. I would kind of try to stay dry, but be prepared to be a little wet and how you deal with that.
Can we get away with the DCF food bag? No. Long story short, no. There's going to be spots where you won't be able to hang it. You'll be above tree line and there's going to be nowhere to put it. And hanging those bags is such a pain in the butt. Bouncing a box. I don't know anybody that's done a bounce box. A lot of the places you get resupplies, you can't send mail from. So a lot of times it's a one-way ticket. Your box is there and that you can't necessarily send stuff away. So yeah, I think depending on how you're getting your resupply, but like Saskatchewan Crossing, you can't send anything from there. However you figure out to get your gear in section B at Bolton Creek, hopefully we'll have an update on that soon and we'll let everybody know. You wouldn't be able to send anything back there unless you had a friend come drop it off for you. The only place you could send stuff would be in Coleman, so the end of section A. Field, you could send stuff away, and then Jasper.
Yeah. And mostly bounce boxes are when like your gear is going to vary a lot over time. Like on the PCT, you've got like desert, mountains, dry, wet, cold, hot, and you can bounce more. But on the GDT, it's very, like it does get colder, but it's more consistent. It's not like you would want to send your rain gear ahead for a few weeks.
Somebody asked about the bidet. Do you have to use your hand? No, this isn't the Skirka method. It's got a little, let's see, I'll just pour some water on my floor to show you.
Demo.
So let's see. So there's basically just a little hole right there. And so once you squeeze it, hopefully this will work. Let's see. Just sprays out like that. That'll get most of it. And then, like I said, I brought a little bit of toilet paper just for like that last wipe. Down or synthetic, I think everybody that I know of brought down. You have to kind of keep it a little more protected. Like on the days where it's pouring rain, like it was just buried in my pack. I wasn't even going to wear it under my rain jacket, no matter how cold it was. Yeah, I guess I know one person that brought the Enlightened equipment. Puffy, I can't remember the name, but for those layers, everybody I know pretty much brought a down Puffy.
I brought the Enlightened equipment Torrid Apex. It's synthetic as a jacket, and it's not that much heavier than a lot of the down jackets out there. So I found it pretty good.
And you were warm enough the whole way?
Yeah, it's actually warmer than a lot of the popular down jackets out there. It's crazy warm.
Yeah, the Torrid works for sure. Like with sleeping bag, like I'm a pretty big down fan because there's so much insulation that it really makes a difference. Jackets, it's not like there's not as much insulation, so your synthetic's not as bad. And it is wetter, so it could go either way on the jacket.
Anybody with any last minute burning questions?
There's still a backlog of Durston Gear specific questions that'll be taken offline.
There's a question on max pack weight. So like, I think everybody's gear list here are like 10 to maybe 15 pounds. And then you're going to have a couple pounds of water, maybe like a pound of fuel. So you'll be in like the high teens with that stuff. And then food, 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds a day. So like worst case on say 10-day stretch, you might have another 20 pounds of food. So like getting into the high 30s, maybe 40 if you got some, you stocked up on beer in town or something.
I think
most
mine for F&G leaving Jasper, I didn't weigh it, but I think it was like 34 pounds. Then Anthony, I see you got your hand up. Do you have a question?
You guys hear me?
Mhm.
The one thing I found out helped for foot care, if anybody wanted to know, I used the anti-chafing cream. I think Skirka talks about a lot, but it literally helped my feet a ton in the dolly sods. My feet were wet every day. They did not prune. They didn't wrinkle. I put it on like every night before I went to bed. And when I got up, before I put my socks back on and my shoes, which were constantly wet, I'd rub it on again. And seriously, it just keeps water from entering your cell. And it basically causes your feet not to wrinkle. And it was like amazing. It was like the best thing I probably had on the whole trip. So anybody that's worried about like foot care, which, you know, most of us backpacking hikers, that's like key, is keeping your feet clean and safe from blistering and chafing. And you can put it anywhere else too, your armpits, anywhere else that you might have some chafing, but the stuff literally was awesome. So just an FYI to anybody that's going to be somewhere where they're going to be walking a lot in water and the feet are constantly going to be wet, that stuff was miracle stuff.
What brand is
it's called like Gurney Goo.
Sorry, you're answering the
What's
question.
that?
What brand?
It's called Gurney Goo. It's on Garage Grown Gear. It's from New Zealand, I believe. It comes in a tube. You can probably put it into a smaller bottle or squeeze it out to so much as you can need, because a little goes a long way. But you just rub it on your feet and it literally keeps water from entering your cells and causing your feet to get it's just all wrinkly. I wore some sealskin socks too on top of that, which helped out a ton too. And my feet were dry through the whole day. Luckily, we weren't up water over our calf, you know, or up to our knees. So the sealskin still did a good job of keeping the water out. But my feet, and constantly, I mean, every night I was amazed how they were dry. So if anybody wants a little tidbit, I don't know if anyone else uses it or not, but it helped me out a ton.
And a few people have messaged me about the smell-proof bags. The size is 12 by 16, and 2 of those pretty much fit perfectly in a medium-sized Ursack. And there's a couple links to the ones I used. Cool. Well, unless anybody else has any burning questions, I think we'll wrap it all up. Thanks everybody for coming out. It's so awesome to see. Over 100 people were on here at a time, all looking for info on the GDT. So it's great to hear. Like I said, this will all be posted on YouTube in the next day or two. Any questions you think of between now and then, feel free to leave them in the comments on the YouTube. I'll be scanning that for a few days, see what's coming up. Otherwise, everyone, I hope you have a good time on the trail, and thanks for coming out this evening.
Thank you guys so much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good luck with permits.
Yep.
Yeah, happy permit day tomorrow.